Good morning. Welcome to the third and the last tranche of the public hearings by this committee. In this final tranche, we will see more representatives from different stakeholder groups and hear their views. This includes academics, media literacy groups, and civil society members. Now, we have scheduled a large number of witnesses to be heard in the course of our public hearings. As far as we can, we have tried to accommodate the schedules of each witness. Now, we've also tried to group similar stakeholders so that we can have the benefits of hearing them respond to each other's views. Thus, for instance, we've had panels of tech and media companies, and that format has worked well. Now, inevitably, this has created some scheduling difficulties, and we've had to work out various iterations with many witnesses, including overseas witnesses. Where one witness is an intended panel is not available, we would need to go back to the others in the panel to check if alternative dates are possible. Now, some changes were also necessary because our estimates on time that we needed with different witnesses also changed as the hearing progressed. Now, some points needed more elaboration while others were sufficiently ventilated. Likewise, our need for certain witnesses. Now, we thank all the witnesses for accommodating these changes, and we look forward to hearing their views. The committee would also like to register our thanks to the Parliamentary Secretariat for their assistance in managing these extensive hearings. Let's commence. Clark, is the next witness ready? Okay. Please bring the witness online. This will be by teleconference. Good morning. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, fine. Okay, for the record, could you please state your name and the position you hold in your organization?
Yes, my name is Hany Farid. I am a professor and chairman of computer science at Dartmouth College in the United States.
Okay. The evidence which you will be giving today before the committee will be taken on affirmation. The clerk will now administer the affirmation.
I, Hany Farid,
do solemnly and sincerely and truly
solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence which I shall give
evidence which I shall give
before this committee
before this committee
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome to the public hearing of the Select Committee on Deliberate Online Falsehoods. The focus for today's evidence gathering session is for us to put questions to you. Now, you have taken a solemn obligation to answer our questions truthfully, and I'll now call on Dr. Janil to begin. Dr. Janil.
Good morning, Professor Farid. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your submission. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you through some of the comments that you've made in your submission, as well as some other documentation, and then we could have a discussion about perhaps if there are any issues behind the statements that you've made, and then we'll go on a bit further from there, if you don't mind. If I understand you correctly, this is going to be a very challenging problem for the foreseeable future. It's not an easily solvable problem. And in one of your paragraphs on page 1, you said, reining in online abuses is challenging. We can and must do more to mitigate the harm that is being seeded and fueled online, while at the same time maintaining an open and free internet where ideas can be shared and debated.
Yes.
But you then also draw the distinction about fake or false images and videos as distinct from speech. And you pay some attention to the ability for distortions to occur around images and videos. I think this is your page 4 of your submission, where you say, even relatively unskilled users can now manipulate and distort the message of visual media. This is enabled by the wide scale of availability of sophisticated image and video editing applications that permit editing in ways that are very difficult to detect either visually or with current image analysis and visual media forensic tools. And the scale of this difficulty, you've got on to say, the difficulty faced is that there are more than 1 billion uploads to Facebook each day and 300 hours of video uploaded to YouTube each minute of the day. Professor, your distinction between images and videos versus text is related to its impact, or if I understand your submission, is it more about the possibility for using a technological solution to solve the problem?
It's the latter. I'm not making a claim about impact. I think both can be very impactful. I mean, there's no doubt that images and video and recordings, because of the way we digest that type of material, can be very impactful, but words can be equally impactful. What I was referring to was the type of technology that we have deployed on the child exploitation side, on the counter-extremism side, that can find and remove digital imagery, specifically images and videos. That technology is well understood. It has been deployed for over a decade, and it has been used to some real effect in limiting the distribution of very harmful material. It could also be used on the fake news front by finding images, video, audio recordings that are known to be fake, falsehoods, recordings that were not made by people purported to make them, and we could remove that. Text, despite the notion that it might be easier, can also be very tricky. But let me preface this by saying I am not an expert on natural language processing, on text-based analysis. I am an expert on imagery, video, image, and audio analysis. So I think that there are things that can be done on the text side, but it's very easy to manipulate text to look very different in different contexts. And you know this because we still have a spam problem. Right, so decades later, decades of research in trying to eliminate very simple spam messages continues to fail. So dealing with fake text is extremely challenging. They're all challenging to varying degrees, but we have some fairly well-known solutions in the image and video space that I think could be deployed today on the fake news front.
And the need to deploy such technology specific to video and imagery is linked to its potential to reach, go viral very quickly as compared to a simple text post. Is that your contention?
I think it is. So I think what we've been seeing over the last few years is that fake news is moving from a simple web page that somebody props up to make it look like a real news story to now full-blown videos of world leaders saying things that they've never said, so doctored video. And I think we can agree that when you read something and when you see a world leader saying something, those are very different impacts in the way we process and the way we believe that information. So I think all signs are coming into this year and next year as the technology has been developing to create these fakes, that we are going to start to see these types of fakes rolling out in national and state elections to try to manipulate public opinion. I will mention that we have always seen manipulated images and manipulated video for decades, and in fact, even back to pre-digital. But the concern now is the sophistication of the technology that allows for the digital media to be manipulated. And then, of course, there's the other component to this, which we can talk about, which is the way social media is not just hosting this, but is promoting the material. Every time there's a world event, we see that the YouTubes, the Facebooks, and the Twitters are promoting at the highest levels the conspiracy theories and the fake news because they attract more clicks, more attention, more advertising dollars. So there's really two components to this discussion. I guess three: the creation of the fakes, the distribution of the fakes, and then how we bring them down and take them offline.
With respect to the middle component, the distribution of deliberate online falsehoods, you talked a bit about the online platforms promoting such material because it attracts revenue for them. Do you believe that this is a deliberate editorial decision, or is it an emergent phenomena from the business model and the structure of the platform?
I think it's a little bit of both. So let me preface this by saying I'm not an expert on economics or business models. Now, I don't think there is somebody flipping a switch saying promote this, don't promote this. But I think there is somebody designing the algorithms that propagate this material to the top. And I think that it's done knowingly. I think the YouTubes and the Facebook know at the end of the day that this material is being promoted. And at least from the Facebook side, we have heard from the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, that they do want to change, that they do want to engage in a more meaningful way. We've not heard similar things, I should mention, from YouTube, but we have heard at least a promise to do better on the Facebook side. Whether that will come around or not, I think remains to be seen, however.
Thank you. So you go on in terms of your discussion and your submission to talk about solutions and the limitations of various options. Given what you've just said, then your position that an AI or an algorithmic solution to the problem, given that part of the problem is caused by an algorithmic design, maybe we might need a little bit of an explanation about that.
Sure. So today there's currently three ways of thinking about online moderation. One is the good old-fashioned manual way. And that's largely the way we have been doing things in terms of user-flagged abuses. So a user, law enforcement flags content, humans at the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter side manually review and then make a decision. It stays up or it goes down. So the manual review is one option. The other option is the technology that we've developed, the robust hashing, the photo DNA, the eGlyph technology. And that is a combination of two things. It starts with a user, you flag content, the company decides it wants to take it down. It then decides, not only are we going to take it down this one time, but we will take it down for all future uploads. So you extract from that content, whether it's an image, a video, or an audio, a signature that is distinct to that device, to that piece of digital material, and then you eliminate future uploads. So if you will, that's a hybrid approach, part human, part computer. Okay? The third approach is the fully autonomous, AI-based, computer-based, no humans in the loop. Okay? So that is, you learn, machine learning, what is child exploitation, what is extremism, what is fake news, and then you unleash that technology to decide every time content comes up, is it allowed, is it not allowed? So the problem with the first approach, the manual, is it doesn't scale, right? At 1 billion uploads a day and hundreds of hours of video a minute, you can't hire enough people to do the moderation. The problem with the last solution, fully autonomous, is the accuracy is not even close to where you need to be. So even the absolutely best machine learning AI-based systems have error rates 1 in 1,000, maybe if things are going very well, 1 in 10,000, okay? So at a scale of billions of uploads a day, you are now talking about millions of mistakes a day, right? It's untenable. You will have social media eliminating posts incorrectly at a rate that would be prohibitive. So that's not to say that we shouldn't work harder to develop better AI systems, but my belief today, in the next few years, is that the solutions have to be somewhere in the middle of a combination of human and computer. So the robust hashing technology that I've described to you and that has been deployed for over a decade is highly effective. I think that the machine learning algorithms and approaches could be used, but in conjunction with humans. So that is, they can be the early flags, and then the humans have to go and review. Once a decision is made, that content can then be eliminated from future uploads using the robust hashing. So I think most likely that, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to have a combination of human and computer efforts in order to find and remove this type of content, because the AI systems are simply not there. Let me add one other component to this, which I think complicates the fully autonomous systems. is that like the spam, anti-spam, and virus, antivirus, the adversary doesn't just stop. The adversary adapts. So if I build an algorithm that blocks an adversary, they don't just go home. They adapt the generation of the content to be to bypass the filters. We have had this fight for decades in a number of computer privacy and security issues. So whatever fully autonomous systems you develop, they will constantly be attacked. And by the way, they'll be attacked by AI systems. So you'll have AI systems creating content, AI systems trying to detect it, and AI systems trying to defeat it. And now we have a little bit of an arms race with these AI systems. So I think at least for the foreseeable future, we are going to have to create a fairly rigorous moderation of humans who will augment what computers can do.
Thank you. We'll return to this question a little bit later, and because I think we do need to spend a bit of time thinking about how we approach the problem and what might be the considerations, both from the model of the solution as well as the constraints and so forth. But can we spend a little bit of time talking about the technology itself? Because I think it's worth understanding what's possible and what's not possible. So I think you described a little bit of it, or quite a lot of it actually, in your past comments, but if we could perhaps expand a little bit. The technology that you're talking about, the sort of photo DNA and e-glyph, right, I think are the two terms that you've used. So if I understand your premise correctly, and forgive me if I'm oversimplifying, but I think we need to maybe perhaps make sure that this is recorded correctly. It analyzes, this is from your page 2 of your submission, the technology extracts from a digital image, audio, or video a distinct digital signature. This is what you're calling the hash algorithm. So a mathematical analysis of an image or a series of images, which is what a video is, generating a mathematical function which is unique to that product. Am I with you? Is that correct so far?
That's correct.
And the uniqueness of this hash algorithm then would allow the same image then to be identified unambiguously as content across a number of platforms. It's platform agnostic.
It's platform agnostic. I will add, I just want to correct one thing. It's not unambiguously. So there are errors in the software. We estimate the errors are on the order of 1 in 100 billion. So that is, we need to see 100 billion uploads. So let's call that 100 days of uploads on Facebook before we mistake two images for the same one, okay? Now here's where the tension is with this technology. I could make it unambiguous. So I could make it so that the errors are essentially 0. But the issue is that we need to not only be able to identify the image, but we have to be able to identify the image if it has undergone some simple modifications. So if somebody changes the size, or changes the color, or recompresses the image, or maybe takes the metadata out of the image, or maybe takes a video and crops out a small segment of it. So in order to be able to detect simple modifications like that, we have to give up on perfect, unambiguous, 0 error rates. And you can see what the tension is. I need to be able to detect this image and a small number of variants of that image. And so that opens the door to a small number of errors. We've estimated that a 1 in 100 approximately error rate is an acceptable error rate when we were deploying this in the child exploitation space. And this was done in collaboration with the social media platform. So everything you described is exactly right, except for that one piece I wanted to just be clear about.
No, thank you, that's useful. Now, in your written submission, you also talk about the process and the challenge and delay at developing this technology. So I think it was the last paragraph of page 1 where you talked about the technology coalition and over 5 years from 2003 to 2008 not developing a technology-based solution to this. But then you, in partnership with Microsoft, developed this over a year?
Yes.
And you've gone on to improve it over time?
Yes.
And it's been deployed?
Photo DNA has been deployed since 2008 on most major internet platforms.
Give us
the extension.
Go on, please.
The extension of that software, which we call eGlyph, which was done in collaboration with the Counter Extremism Project, that's a New York-based NGO that I work with as an advisor, has not been deployed on the social media platforms, despite us. I should mention, by the way, that PhotoDNA was given away for free. We were not trying to make money here. The same is true of eGlyph. We simply wanted to develop this technology because we felt it could be useful in removing some of this harmful content. eGlyph has not been deployed, although it has been offered to social media platforms, but PhotoDNA is, for the last decade, been deployed on most major internet platforms.
Can you maybe give us some idea of the impact or success of PhotoDNA since its deployment?
It's a good question. So there's a couple ways to define success. Let's start by talking about how much content are we looking for, right? So remember that the way this technology works is you say this is the content I want to find, and then we look for that content, okay? So the database of known child exploitation that we are searching for on average is about 80,000 pieces of known child pornography. I should mention that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is a US-based organization that deals with child exploitation, has over 80 million known child exploitation images. So this 80,000 is a relatively small number of what is known to us. In 2016, which is the last year that I have statistics for, we eliminated 10 million known child pornography images from redistribution. That's only looking for 80,000 images, right? So if we increase that to 800,000, 8 million, 80 million, so 3 orders of magnitude, you are talking about potentially we could eliminate billions of known child pornography. Now, the natural question is, well, why aren't you looking for more? You have the ability to find and remove this. And the answer, I will have to say, is a little perverse, is that the law here in the US is that when a social media company or an individual or law enforcement finds child pornography, they must report it to NCMEC. And so what happens is, as we expand that database, NCMEC gets more and more and more reports. And frankly, they're simply unable to deal with all these reports. So we have this very strange situation where we have technology that can effectively eliminate most of the child pornography that has previously been seen, but we don't have the manpower to deal with all of those reports. So that's the situation right now.
So if I understand you correctly, having defined the type of imagery that you feel needs to be targeted, there are technological solutions in place which have been deployed for more than 5 years, which are able to effectively detect and, just correct me if I'm wrong, prevent the upload of, rather than just delete once it's already uploaded, millions of those images.
That's an incredibly important point, right? Because on the internet, 2 hours is an eternity, right? Things go viral in a matter of minutes or hours. So this material that we are talking about never even makes it online. So today, if you try to upload one of these 80,000 images that are known to us on Facebook, it will never see the light of day. Your account will be frozen at the time that you upload, and a report will be sent to NCMEC and eventually possibly law enforcement. So that technology, that infrastructure, that reporting mechanism exists today.
And has been in use by social media platforms since?
Microsoft deployed it in 2009, Facebook in 2010, Twitter in 2011, Google in 2016. So for almost 10 years now, it has been live and deployed.
And what is the determination of the images that are detected? So these are declared as illegal images?
Yes.
But
so the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is the keeper of that determination. They are the experts in this space. I will tell you that they are exceedingly cautious to make sure that the material that is being hashed and searched for is 100% clearly child pornography. So the images are only of children 12 years and younger. These are prepubescent. There is no issue of age verification. and the images have a clear sexual act shown in them, so there's no question as to whether it's child pornography or not. So one of the things that we've tried to be very careful about, both in the child exploitation and the extremism space, is to acknowledge that there is material that may be disputed as to whether it's illegal, inappropriate, or violations of terms of service. But we also acknowledge that there is material that is unambiguously illegal, inappropriate, and violations of terms of service, and that's the material that we go after.
And so this material, the way the technology works, there is no recourse, redress, or appeal process. It has been declared illegal, and therefore the platform is prohibited from uploading it.
There is a recourse. So when the material is found on the platform, the accounts are frozen. Well, sorry, let me correct that. How the social media companies deals with the report varies from company to company. So what some companies do is they say, we trust the technology. When we find content according to this technology, we will freeze but not delete the account. The user will be sent notification that their account has been frozen, and they can dispute whether that was appropriate or not. Okay? A report is made with NCMEC. NCMEC will then investigate and determine whether to contact law enforcement. So there is a recourse that if the technology makes a mistake, the user can have the account unlocked. They can appeal the decision.
Just let me understand this correctly. If a new image is decided, if the process, the human in the loop, as it were, and the system and the organization decides that a new image is now to be declared illegal, that is the process that you've just described. The account is then frozen, and then there are opportunities for redress and recourse. No. Or is this where you have an image that has not yet been uploaded, but in the act of trying to upload a forbidden image, your account becomes frozen? You can then have an appeal process for that. The latter.
That's exactly right. It's that part, yes.
Okay. So in other words, the illegal, prohibited image has not been disseminated online, has not been uploaded, but someone has attempted to do so. And so the technology, as well as the operational policy of the social media platforms, blocks the attempt to do this, and at the same time, freezes the account.
Yes.
But the account holder can dispute the freezing of the account, but not the illegality of the image.
They can, well, I mean, if in fact the software in the 1 in 100 billion times made a mistake, then the software made a mistake, the account is unfrozen, and we apologize, okay? But they do not have a recourse to say this image is legal, because once the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children says this is a minor, this is child pornography, it is, as a matter of law, child pornography. So there is no recourse in trying to change the definition. Now, I should mention that that definition varies from country to country. So here in the US, drawings, cartoons, images that are not of actual children are protected. In the EU, that is not the case, okay? So these laws on what does and what does not constitute child pornography varies from country to country. And of course, the same is true of extremism. Things that would be banned in the UK are different than in Singapore and in the US, of course.
And so the way this technology is deployed allows a jurisdictional variation over the process.
That's exactly right. So the database, for example, that is used on EU Facebook can be different than the database in the US, than the database in Saudi Arabia, for example. So we can move across jurisdictional boundaries by just deciding on what is and what is not prohibited speech.
Thank you. If I could then move to some of the comments that you've made about the limitations of a pure technological solution in your submission. And I think you're making the case that there always needs to be a human in the loop.
At least for now.
Okay. But for example, you talk about first the problem, this is on page 2 of your written submission, first the problematic content would still need to be first identified by human moderators. And they go on to say it cannot, without human assistance, discover new illegal or inappropriate content. So this technology would still have to be paired with manual review. Now, so the initial decision-making process has to be human-based, but once that is done, the technology can largely run unsupervised until there is a disputed process or a disputed decision, in which case then a human process is activated again. Am I understanding your explanation of the limitations of this process correctly?
That's exactly right. And I'll add, if I may, add one more piece to that. On the child exploitation side, the content is illegal. Whether you're a news organization, law enforcement, a private citizen, it doesn't matter, the content is illegal. When it comes to things like fake news, extremism-related material, the rules are a little bit different. That material is not inherently illegal. It may violate the terms of service, but it is not illegal. And so there you may have to make some decisions as, do we allow news organizations to post a beheading video, but we don't allow a known terrorist organization? So some of the decisions, there has to also be editorial decisions for the non-illegal content as well.
If I could return to some comments you made earlier about the three potential models of a fully human system, a hybrid system that you are advocating for, or a fully autonomous AI-driven system.
Yes.
I think you were alluding to what is the current process of how material is put up and presented to us, whether it's on a news feed or on a search site, as being seen to be autonomous, algorithmic, and AI-driven. And how the presumption is then that our curation or editorial process needs to be human to sort of overcome this, but that is a problem of scale. Now, can I first ask you, is your contention that in truth the process through which information is presented to us is not fully autonomous? In other words, there are human decisions that are made about the design of the algorithms, about the way these algorithms will rank and weight certain issues one way or the other, the way the AI machine, the AI engine will deal with interpersonal relationships. These are human decisions that have been made to reinforce what is a semi-autonomous process. So actually, the way information is presented to us already is as a result of a hybrid process and not a fully autonomous AI-driven process. Is that your position?
That is absolutely true. At the end of the day, these algorithms are not being created by computers. They are being programmed. And they are being programmed to optimize engagement by the users. At the end of the day, social media is about engagement. Whether that's a Twitter, a Facebook, a YouTube, or a Google, the more time you spend on these, the better it is. So the algorithms are designed to make decisions to engage you more. So the clickbait, well, it turns out it works. The sensational, the conspiracy theories, the fake news, the things that keep you liking and tweeting and clicking is what is being optimized for by these companies. So you're absolutely right that these are human decisions at the end of the day, because we are deciding that this is what we want to optimize for, as opposed to trustworthiness. We could say we want to optimize for the more trustworthy the news organization, the higher it gets ranked, the more likely it is to get promoted on the feed. So you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, these are human decisions on what the algorithms are being optimized to do.
There are two counter positions taken by the platform and tech companies, as well as other people who've come and given representations to this committee. One is that the decisions are made entirely autonomously, or algorithmically, that this is an AI process. And some of the criticisms from the people who've come to the committee is that the tech companies would like to have this as the position, because otherwise it suggests that they have editorial control, which would imply that they want to they would need to be then dealt with as a media company.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, you're absolutely right that let's talk about this distinction between platforms and publishers. right? If you're a publisher, Communications Decency Act, Section 230 in the US doesn't apply to you anymore, and you have liability. If you're a platform, you don't have liability, okay? That's the way it works. So you're absolutely right that the social media company, everything they have done over the last decade and a half has been to push and insist that they are simply a generic platform and therefore hold no responsibility, okay? So I understand that. I understand what the liability issue is. But it doesn't make any sense to me to claim that the AI algorithms are simply evolving to create this policy. At the end of the day, the AI algorithms are being programmed by humans. And any AI-based system is given an objective to maximize. Okay, so for example, I build an AI system to play chess. What am I optimizing? Win. Win as often as possible, lose as infrequently as possible. I build an AI system to read text. What's the optimization function? Get all the characters right. Build an AI system to drive a car. Don't run into anything. Get me from point A to point B. All of these AI systems are having what is called an objective function. It is what you are trying to maximize or to minimize. Okay, that is programmed. That is not created by a computer. That is programmed by a human. And the decision, these AI-based decisions, and again, I should say, I don't work at Google, I don't work at Facebook and Twitter. I don't know exactly how these algorithms are being designed. But I can tell you that the general consensus among academics is that these are being designed to maximize engagement. How much time do you spend on the platform? That shouldn't be a shock. That is when the products are given away for free, and when the underlying business model is advertising, then what you want to maximize is how long people stay on the platforms. I think that seems fairly intuitive. I respectfully disagree with this notion that somehow the algorithms have just decided that the sensational, the clickbait, and the conspiracies are best, and we have no control over it. I reject that hypothesis.
There is a slightly nuanced, different position, which is that the human in the loop are the many, many users of the community that this platform serves, rather than the company themselves. That these standards around what constitutes useful engagement versus clickbait versus manipulation are derived from the users being the human in the loop, as it were.
Right.
The criticism to that is that this is behavior that is open to manipulation, and that various entities have tried to manipulate that behavior maliciously.
Right.
In parallel, coming out of your argument about how the algorithms are designed for engagement, that process for the platforms then to manipulate that behavior so that they maximize the effectiveness of their outreach is also possible. Is that a point of view that you'd agree with?
It's a fair point. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem here, right? So is it that the algorithms are promoting this stuff and I'm simply clicking on them because they're engaging? Or is it that when I see them, I click them and therefore the algorithms keep promoting them, right? I suspect it's a little bit of both, but I think it's also fair to, I think you raise a really good point too, which is that if you are simply maximizing for engagement, then you are vulnerable to manipulation. And that is a serious issue that we have been seeing on social media play out over the last few years. And I don't think the social media companies have figured out how to deal with that. We see that everywhere from the Russian meddling in elections to the way YouTube videos that promote conspiracies very quickly propagate to the top. But there's another issue that we should talk about too, which is it's not just what is sort of being promoted on the feed, but if you watch a YouTube video, you watch the video and you get to the end and it recommends other things. And you click on that video and it recommends something else. Okay? And there's been some really startling analyses that show that you can start with a video about the moon landing. And you can very quickly, within a few clicks, end up with the conspiracy theories about how the moon landing was faked. Or you start with a video about a moderate Muslim cleric, and you end up watching Al-Qaeda videos within 5 clicks. And many things with the prediction of these YouTube videos, this is also true in child exploitation, that you end up in these very dark areas very quickly, leads you to the most sensational, the conspiracy, and that I'm not convinced that's purely human driven. That is being driven, I believe, by the algorithmic optimization of engagement, that we know that when people see these sensational videos, they click, therefore we want to promote those videos to people. So I don't think that could explain the whole phenomenon. So I think that I'm certainly not saying that we as the public don't hold some blame in this. At the end of the day, we're clicking on this. But I think the social media companies also have some responsibility for how they are optimizing the algorithms for what they feed us.
Thank you. If I could then move on to a big part of your thesis is, your submission is about how the tech companies have to do more. That there's more that can be done and more that needs to be done by the technology companies. And you talk about the Technology Coalition from page 1, how they did not develop or deploy any effective solution. It took you a year to develop and deploy PhotoDNA, but it took a further 5 years before Google was willing to deploy this technology on their platform. But you then draw the distinction between the success that this approach has had for child pornography and child exploitation towards the absence of movement with respect to extremism. How the Counter-Extremism Project, along with government agencies, this is page 2 of your submission, how the Counter-Extremism Project, along with the government agencies around the world, have been calling on technology companies and social media in particular to rein in the ability of extremists to recruit, radicalize, plan, and execute attacks. But the response of the technology companies, largely denial and inaction, has been eerily similar to the call in early 2000 to combat online child exploitation. The technology companies are likely to strongly disagree with your statements. Some of the statements they've issued, this was Facebook making a statement in November 2017. 99% of the ISIS and Al-Qaeda related terror content we remove from Facebook is content we detect before anyone in our community has flagged it to us. And in some cases, before it goes live on the site. Once we are aware of a piece of terror content, we remove 83% of subsequently uploaded copies within 1 hour of upload. A further example of this denial or disagreement from them, this was Mr. Simon Milner's response here in this committee when we had quoted some of your representations to him. And he says, and I quote, "It is absolutely wrong and completely unfair for him to say that. We have provided evidence to you about what Facebook," he said us, "Facebook is doing on the issue of deliberate online falsehoods. If you would like us to provide information about all the work our companies have done over the last several years to combat terrorism and radicalization, we can do that and absolutely prove to you that his evidence is fundamentally wrong. He has a particular axe to grind about his form of technology, and he's absolutely wrong on this. If you look at what a number of different governments have said around the world, including the European Commission, about the work that we have done collectively to address this problem, you will find a very different answer. We are very happy to provide that, but I really want to be in no uncertain terms tell you that his evidence is wrong." And then in further quote, Google and YouTube, just to make sure this is a platform agnostic process, in December 2017 saying 98% of videos we remove for violent extremism are flagged by our machine learning algorithms, and that 70% is removed within 8 hours of being uploaded. So I would ask you 3 questions, Professor Farid. Firstly, am I right to understand that moving on from child exploitation, child pornography, with respect to issues around extremism and terrorism, all the platforms claim and may have evidence to support this, that they have been able to then prevent material from being uploaded, as well as take down material which has been identified as being inappropriate. And I use the word inappropriate. These are not necessarily material that someone has declared as being illegal, which is a distinctly different approach from what you've talked about for child pornography. That their approach is once inappropriate content has been flagged, they have both the ability and the will to prevent an upload as well as taking down material. That's my first question. To what extent is this capability there? My second question, if I'll just scope out my questions and then you can choose how to answer. My second question is, what is your response to their characterization of your comments? So their denial or their disagreement with your position and the various quotes that I've read out, and we can refresh your memory if necessary. And thirdly, why do you think there is this either discordance between what is possible and what they're actually doing, the discordance between what you are stating as the reality of today and what they are saying is actually what they're doing? So 3 different questions. The extent to which this is being developed and dealt with for extremism and terrorism, your comments on what they have said about your position, and why you feel there is this discordance.
Okay, good. So let's talk about a few things. So first of all, the technology companies have been being asked for years to take down counter-extremism and terrorism-related material, starting back in 2013, 2014. And effectively, nothing got done until late 2017. And that happened in response to incredible pressure from the EU and growing pressure from Capitol Hill here in the US. So I reject this notion that the technology companies have been proactive, have always been eager to have this fight. They drag their feet with the extremism-related material in the same way that they drag their feet in the child exploitation. So there's a little revisionist history happening here. And let me be clear, I don't have an axe to grind. This has never been a business issue, never been a financial issue. This has always been about my belief that the technology companies are not doing as good of a job as I would like them to do, and that I think that they need to do. So nobody can deny, despite claims now that they were always supportive of the child pornography, is that they dragged their feet, in some cases for a decade, to do anything. So that has been a pattern of behavior that we have seen over and over again, not just in the beginning of the internet, but even until fairly recently. So I should preface this by saying, I don't know, because the companies won't reveal to us what the technology is that they're using. We hear statistics from them, but we actually don't have a lot of transparency. We don't have a lot of ways of understanding how much material is coming in and how much material is being really eliminated. I'm not sure I understand how the technology company can say they eliminate 98% of the material without knowing what the denominator is in that ratio. How do they know what they're missing? So I'll get back to that in a little bit. Okay, so in terms of, do they have the capability to do this? I believe that they do for the following reason. For many years, for far longer than we've been dealing with the child exploitation and the counter-extremism, the technology companies have had technology to find and remove copyright infringement materials. And the reason they have that is because they were getting sued and they had a financial interest in developing and deploying that technology. So I genuinely believe that they have the ability to do this, okay? There has not been a lot of, in fact, there's been no transparency. So they claim now, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter claim to be using a similar type of technology to photo DNA to find and remove extremist material. We do not know, however, how large the database is, how much material is in there, how aggressively is it grown, how much material do they find, how quickly does it get removed? We don't know this. Now, I will say, I can't say anything about Facebook, but let me say a few things about YouTube. So we have been using our robust hashing technology to try to determine how often extremist material gets uploaded to YouTube and how long it stays on that platform. And I will tell you that I dispute this idea that I think you said 98% of the material is removed. We are seeing material stay online for hours, days, and in some cases weeks, garnering thousands and tens of thousands of views. And some of it comes down maybe after 48 hours, some of it stays on weeks later. So at least from our view of what we are seeing being uploaded to YouTube, we're able to find material that YouTube doesn't seem to be able to find. It is absolutely incorrect to say that they are finding this at upload. This content, the same videos are being uploaded over and over again, and they are staying live for hours, days, and in some cases weeks. So I don't believe that story. With respect to the technology companies, you have to look at the pattern of behavior over the last 2 decades. We have seen a pattern of behavior starting back in the early 2000s to today. Look, you can't open a newspaper without reading about the issues with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, of how the social medias have been less than forthcoming and how they have been dealing with these issues. So you will excuse me if I'm less than simply trustworthy that as they cite statistics, we should simply say, okay, everything is solved, we should all go away. The fact is this material is still being pushed online. The fact is we can still find this material, at least on YouTube. I can't speak for Facebook because we can't examine the private faces of Facebook the way we can with YouTube. But I can tell you, we are finding this material on YouTube on a daily basis. And I think there was a third question about the disconnect between the technologies, yeah? Okay.
Between the viewpoints.
So, between the viewpoints, right. So, again, you know, I think given the pattern of behavior of the social media companies and the less than aggressiveness on dealing with these issues, I think it is reasonable to ask for more transparency and more details on exactly what they are doing, how this technology has been deployed, what is the technology? We still have not actually gotten a very clear answer to that. How aggressive is the database that they are looking for? How aggressively does it grow? Who contributes to it? It's supposed to be a shared database, but is it actually shared? I will tell you from talking to insiders at these companies, I think it is not the picture that is being painted to your committee.
Thank you very much, Professor. So this, in a way, is well highlighted in the statement that the Counter-Extremism Project put out on January 17th. And if I might just quote some passages from that, I presume you stand by it. It says, it is time for regulators to promulgate measures to force the industry to take necessary action to protect the public. But earlier on, leading up to that, CEP remains concerned about the level of commitment, consistency, and transparency that will be required to overcome the systematic misuse of these platforms. While big social media platforms acknowledge the existence of radicalizing content that violates their stated terms of service, their response to date has followed a familiar pattern utilized in response to other discoveries of abuse: denial, followed by half measures and attempts to spin the issue in the media, and finally reluctant action when faced with threats to their bottom line or possible regulatory action. Then several paragraphs which I think are very similar to the statements that you've made. And then one action does not constitute a lasting solution. Industry-wide standards are needed to ensure the timely and permanent removal of dangerous content. Lawmakers and the public should demand that tech finally implement industry-wide standards and policies that ensure the timely and permanent removal of dangerous, extremist, and terrorist material, establish measurable best practices, and transparently deploy proven technologies to prevent the re-upload of materials already determined to violate company policies. And then the statement that I began with. So if I might synthesize what we've talked about today, Professor, you're explaining that the technology and the processes exist to be able to identify and define a particular type of imagery, whether still or video, that having done so, you can robustly detect the uploads of such video or where such images are already online, that this has been very successfully done for child pornography and child exploitation. The social media platforms claim that they have had some significant success with extremism, but you believe they can do a lot more and that perhaps their success is limited in this space. And some of this is demonstrated by their ability to very successfully go after copyrighted material as it affects their business model and their financial incentives. So, and so the lack of impact or the lack of effectiveness is perhaps a decision around policy or design or business model, rather than a technical impediment. And in this process, Please?
I completely agree with everything you've said so far.
And in this process, we have a long track record of material which has been identified through due process to be illegal and therefore acted upon, inappropriate but not necessarily illegal and therefore acted upon, other material which has been determined to be illegal or inappropriate but not acted upon. And that decision to act or not act is at the behest of the social media companies.
Yes.
And that ultimately this solution will require a combination of a regulatory approach, humanistic approach in terms of the determining what is appropriate or what is illegal, and a technological solution in order to ensure that the effect is at scale and fast enough, and that the technology today is not an impediment to this process that I have described.
I completely agree with everything you said. And I'll, if I may just add one more thing. When we developed PhotoDNA in 2008, 2009, it was very clear that this was supposed to be the start of more development of technology. And I will say that from 2008, when we first developed it, deployed it in 2009 and on, to 2017, there was no more development of any types of technologies. So imagine the 3, 4, 5 largest technologies in the world, worth collectively trillions of dollars, deciding we don't need to innovate anymore for 5, 6, 7 years. I reject this idea that they are aggressively going after this content. It's simply, the data simply doesn't support that. The actions simply don't support it. I think that they are, I think as the statement said, is that they put in just enough to stave off the regulatory issues, but not enough to really go after it. And I think a lot of it comes back down to the issue that we were talking about earlier with platform versus publisher. As soon as they get in the business of moderating the content, they start to risk looking like a publisher, and that has serious liability issues for them.
Thank you very much, Professor Farid, for your submission as well as talking to us this morning. Mr. Chairman, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Desmond? Yeah.
Professor, can I just, and Desmond on the panel, can I just ask one question? Many representatives who wrote in to the select committee described how important it is to put in efforts on the front of media literacy to get users of social media sites, of search engines, to be able to discern whether what they're reading is true or false, whether it's hate speech, whether it is content that is illegal. Based on your research or your understanding of this space, to what extent can media literacy assist in addressing the spread of deliberate online falsehoods?
So let me say I'm not an expert on media literacy. I'm not an expert in social science. However, having said that, I do believe that the solution to the proliferation of fake news has a multi-dimensional approach. We've been talking a lot about the responsibility of the social media. We've been talking a lot about technology that can be deployed, but we absolutely have to talk about how we as consumers digest digital media. We have to change our viewing habits. Again, I'm not an expert on that. My intuition and my belief is that has to play a fairly fundamental role, because at the end of the day, we are the ones reading, we are the ones sharing, and we are the ones promoting this. So I think we can't ignore that part. We have to consider all aspects that we've been talking about.
Can I just take it one step further, Professor? The social media companies have, in testimony in the UK and the US and here in Singapore, both written and oral, articulated the importance of the users of their sites being discerning. So media literacy efforts, they're investing in it, they're working with stakeholders on it. And you spoke earlier, and I was listening to your testimony, about your sense that, and it's your conjecture, because you can't see inside the black box, that social media companies are, having provided a site that is free to use by members of the public, would, in your conjecture, drive the algorithm towards greater engagement, because the business model is one based on advertising, and you say that's not surprising. You also said, correct me if I'm wrong, that that the algorithm is because it is is designed by humans. It's the parameters are driven by the publishers or the developers of the algorithm. That it is not possible to say that the sites are entirely passive platforms, but in a way they design the algorithm with some commercial objectives to drive the content that users see. How would you, please comment on this, because I'm trying to reconcile the both. On the one hand, they're saying that the users of the site should be careful what they read. On the other hand, they are setting up algorithms that drive content towards these users in a way that is aligned with the interests of advertisers.
Yeah, so this really strikes at the core of the issue, right? So this strikes at the core of the underlying business model of much of the internet today, which is advertising. It's collecting our personal data, whether that is legal or illegal, as we've seen, and then driving advertising to us and keeping us on the platform to keep driving that advertising. At the end of the day, this is a really deep, fundamental, I would argue, existential issue of what we want our internet to be. How do we want access to information? Do we want the Wikipedia model, or do we want the YouTube model? It's one way to think about it, right? And those two platforms are fascinating. On the one hand, you have Wikipedia, right, which is not perfect, but it is not for profit, purely voluntary, no advertising whatsoever, and does a fairly good job of keeping their platform clean and honest and trustworthy. On the other hand, you have this multi-hundred-billion-dollar company, right, which is driven entirely or mostly by advertising dollars, which has a serious fake news, conspiracy, extremism, child pornography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera problem. So one could argue that the core business model is at fault here. I'm not saying that we should be in the business of disrupting the entire business model, but I'm saying that we should not be surprised that when you give away the product for free, what I always tell my students is that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, okay? So we are become the product, right? And I don't think we should be surprised. Here's my hope, because I don't know how to change that fundamental underlying business model. So here's my hope. My hope is that companies will emerge that will offer products to people like me, people like you, people who don't want to be the target of this type of invasion of privacy, and that we will change the underlying business models in a way that will lead to healthier online communities. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. But my hope is that as we are seeing pressure build over the last few years on business as usual social media, I think we are going to start to see changes. I think this is something that governments can start to encourage the development of more honest, more safe, and more private and more secure infrastructures for our online world. This is a terrific role that governments can play.
Can I just ask a final question, Professor? And that's in relation to my colleague's earlier question, his second question to you, a second last question about your strong characterization of the, in your view, the social media companies' intransigence, the dragging of their feet over the last, say, 8 years or a decade or longer. It's both in your report as well as what you just said in the last hour or so, that you've characterized the social media companies as doing just about enough to stave off the threat of regulatory intervention, but not doing enough in respect of deliberate online falsehoods as they've done for violent extremism, radicalization, as well as child pornography. And in turn, when put to them, they have made very strong characterizations of your motivations and have articulated a totally different description of the actions over the last decade or so, and that they've been forthcoming and they've been very proactive, they've been leading at the forefront. It's very important for our select committee because the social media companies we view them as partners. We need to work with them on our national security and our social cohesion. They are partners in media literacy, and we need to understand and discern to what extent we can rely on their their submissions, that they will continue to put in a lot of effort and be proactive in finding technological solutions on their part to help tackle this scourge of deliberate online falsehoods. They have indicated that they are prepared to and will put in submissions that tell us their version of history. And can I just ask, Professor, if asked by the committee, would you be prepared to do likewise so that we have two sets of histories for us to make a decision on?
Of course, I'd be happy to. And let me just say a few things. I think it's fair to question people's motivations, right? So why am I so critical of social media companies? Okay. So let me emphasize again, this is not a financial issue. This is not a business issue. This is not an ego issue. I don't care whose technology uses what, right? I am a technologist. I am an academic. And at the end of the day, I am looking at the landscape of where we've been, where we are, and where we are going, and I'm seeing serious issues. I am not the only one. Here in the US, we have had 4 congressional hearings in the last 8 months, one after the other, because every time these social media companies come to Capitol Hill and they testify, there is a sense that there is not a sufficient answer. There was a hearing at the UK just 2 weeks ago on issues of counterterrorism, where the special committee of the UK Parliament was questioning Google's executives on their inaction. You should look at that interview. It's really telling on some really glaring failures, despite the promise over and over again to do more, to do more. So I am very critical. I genuinely believe I don't have an ulterior motive. I'm trying to look at these things and facts as objectively as possible. I agree with you that this is best done in a non-adversarial fashion, that this is best done as a partnership. My concern is that the history has not been one of openness and honesty. So that doesn't mean the future has to be a lack of openness and honesty as well. But I think it requires some amount of due diligence on your part to make sure that it's not just the promise that things are being done, but that you can show quantitatively and critically and analytically that these actions are being done. We continue to see some failings despite what we are being told are technologies in place. So I'm unconvinced that things are working as well. You should go talk to your counterparts in the UK. They have grave concerns about the failures of social media companies to regulate known domestic terror groups within the UK. One of the MPs that was questioning the Google exec or the YouTube exec showed her iPad. That morning, she brought up her YouTube, and it said recommended videos were known terror groups, despite the promise that those things would not be promoted anymore. So, it still continues to be a disconnect between what we are being told and what we are seeing with our own eyes. And so I'm not convinced that we are where we need to be. Now, I will say that in the defense of the social media companies, that there has been action over the last years. I think the last year they have done better. I think it has been largely because of pressure from organizations such as yours, the EU, Capitol Hill, but that doesn't matter, right? It's okay. They're running a business. We are trying to run a society, and they will clash at times. That is fine. So I do think that there's been movement. I will say that I think the movement has been asymmetric. I think the Facebooks have been more responsive than the YouTubes and the Twitters. I think the Microsofts have been more responsive. So I think we shouldn't bundle up all the technology companies to one. I think that they are doing things with different levels of sense of urgency. And I would place Microsoft at sort of one end where they have been very aggressive and I think very good partners. And I think YouTube has been less responsive with respect to that company.
Thank you, Professor.
Ms. Chia Yong.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for spending time with us. I was the one who asked YouTube about your submission. So I read to them, sorry, not YouTube, for Facebook. I read to them some of the comments that you made in your submission, and Their response indeed was that you had a particular axe to grind, as my colleague read out. So I just want to have it on record. He says you have a particular axe to grind about your form of technology, and you're absolutely wrong. So what you're telling us this morning is you have no axe to grind, and it's not about your technology. Is that correct?
This has absolutely nothing to do with technology. So we are in the business of, if you can call it that, of developing technologies either to just give to the companies for free. I don't profit from this at all. So we develop PhotoDNA, it's in worldwide use. We make no money off of that whatsoever. So we develop the technology because we think it can be helpful, and we are happy to give it to the technology companies for free. We have always said from day one, in every conversation I've had with YouTube, in every conversation I've had with Facebook and Microsoft, if you develop a better technology, fantastic. This is not an ego thing. I'm a tenured professor. I've been tenured for a long time. It doesn't matter whether you use my technology or not. So we developed the technologies to prove that these technologies exist. I will mention, however, that prior to our developing of the technology, these companies did not do that. They had years to develop this video-based technology, and they did not. So I think that should give you some pause when they tell you how aggressively and how important this is to them. You should be asking them, well, why did it take you almost 10 years to develop this technology, and only after legislative pressure? So I'm happy that they deploy technology. I'm not convinced that it's as effective as it needs to be, but I have no axe to grind other than I don't think the companies are acting responsibly.
Thank you. Which leads me to my next question. You mentioned that the PhotoDNA had been around, and it took them 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and nothing was done. No improvement in technology. What is the basis for your saying so?
So let me say, I was one of the developers of PhotoDNA. I was part of the release for years. I worked on it. We were monitoring. So I knew a lot about it. I'm still in touch with the people at Microsoft who I developed this with, and my understanding of talking to them, if there has been no improvements to PhotoDNA since that original deployment. Now, an engineer at Microsoft and I recently, just in this last year, developed a variant of PhotoDNA that allows part of that technology to be performed by the user, and then the other part of the technology is developed by the server. So this is called the client-server model. But that was just developed in the last year by myself and Microsoft. To my understanding, that's been the only advance in that technology since it was initially developed, and that the video technology only came out in 2017.
Okay, so this latest variant that you talk about is now available, and how is it available?
I believe it's live on Microsoft's cloud service. I don't know how they are deploying it more widely.
Thank you. So you've talked about child exploitation. You've talked about extremism. These are two terminologies that would raise alarm bells in anyone's ears, right? But if we're talking about fake news has a spectrum, and it may not be as clear in the face, nor outrightly offensive, and definitely not outrightly false. Yes. How is your assessment of the AI capabilities and landscape in the detection of fake news?
So let me mention before I answer that when we first started working in the child exploitation space, we heard from the technology companies and from certain speech groups that the definition of child pornography was not that clear-cut. That there are some things, if the person's 19 years old, and maybe it's not sexually explicit. And so we've heard this argument before on the child exploitation and on the extremism front. And those are perfectly valid concerns. And the way we deal with those is that we stay very clear from the line of ambiguity. We take images in the child exploitation that 12 years and younger with explicit sexual act. In the extremism front, these are videos of showing explicit violence, explicit calls to violence, or explicit glorification of violence. Those are not illegal, but they are violations of the terms of service of all major social media companies, which is what we are asking them to remove them based on. Now, you're absolutely right in the fake news. There is also a spectrum, but that's not fundamentally different than the issues in child exploitation and extremism. They all have a spectrum, right? And so I think the way to deal with this is primarily one of policy, is that what does Facebook and YouTube and Twitter want to do? How do they want to relatively promote these things? So what we've heard from YouTube is they don't want to make decisions on what either stays or doesn't stay. So they're going to promote things that are more trustworthy, the New York Times, the BBC, et cetera, higher than the things that are less trustworthy. That's a perfectly valid way to do things. But to your explicit question is, where are the AI techniques today, and to being able to distinguish between fake news, reliable news, and the things in the middle? It's hard for me to say because I don't have access to the types of things that Google is working on. My understanding of the state-of-the-art technology is that it is not ready to be deployed with the types of accuracy that we would demand at internet scale. And it is a very challenging problem for precisely the reason that you stated, that even we, as the humans, who are in some ways the gold standard, have a hard time with this, right? And so this is why I don't think that the solution can be purely technological, as the previous person was asking me about media literacy. I think this is a multidimensional problem with a multidimensional solution.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. So we have an issue with the definition of fake news, just as in the beginning there was a definition, a problem with the definition of what's child pornography. Having said that, if we're able to then agree on some parameters, as to what might amount to fake news and what would not, there could potentially also be an application of AI. Again, not to 100% accuracy, but it would be an important tool for us to use, but it cannot be the sole implement in the whole process.
So you're absolutely right. Before you develop an AI-based system to differentiate fake from non-fake news, you have to define it. And you're absolutely right. That is our responsibility. The machines can't do that. The same way we define what is child pornography and what is not, what is extremism, what is not. So you're right. We have to come up with reasonably objective, consistent, and transparent definitions of what is and what is not fake news. And then, again, combination of human moderators and training AI systems. So what you should understand about these AI systems is that the modern day AI systems require a phenomenal amount of data to train them. And therein lies the problem, right, with training these systems. You need millions and millions and millions of examples. And then, of course, the adversary adapts, right? So the adversary figures out, oh, if I change these words, if I change this title, if I add these words, it will be classified as non-fake, the way we do with spam, for example. Yeah. So this will be an ongoing challenge. It's not something where we develop technology and simply unleash it and we are done. There has to be a concerted effort to really put a huge amount of resources, and I'm not seeing that. At the last Capitol Hill meeting where the social media companies were, one of our senators asked them, I think it was Facebook or YouTube, I don't remember, said, we spent $10 million last year fighting extremism. And the senator said, yeah, but your profits were in the hundreds of billions. So, you have to ask, where is the commitment when the effort is relatively small? How many people, how much technology, how many resources are being committed to this ongoing fight? And not just the things that we know about. So we know about child exploitation and extremism and fake news, but what about the next exploitation that's around the corner? And that's going to come, right? And so a lot of these platforms are, in my opinion, are too passive. They wait for the problem to come. The problem escalates. There's public outroar, there's legislative pressure, and then we respond. And my argument is there should be more corporate responsibility before the problem escalates to this level, before we have interference in actual national elections around the world. We should be responding before that. Be aware of how these platforms are misused, and we should be dealing with them.
Thank you very much, Professor.
As there are no more further questions, Professor Farid, thank you very much for your participation and your very valuable contributions to the Select Committee process. We'll be sending you a transcript of today's proceedings. Please go through it. If there are any corrections to be made, please make the corrections and send it back to us. Once again, thank you very much for your participation.
So much.
Thank you.
Good night.